Hey guys, Stephanie with AmericanMuscle.com here with the ST Suspension Anti-Sway Bar set for the 2015 and newer S550 Mustang. In this video we're going to be discussing a few different things with the sway bar kit, but mostly we'll be talking about the materials and construction of the sway bars and the install. I'll get more into the install later, but I can tell you right now that this is an easy install, and I'm going to call it a 1 out of 3 wrenches in the difficulty meter. The ST Suspension Anti-Sway Bar set is going to be a good option for someone that's looking to improve their handling for their S550 with one purchase that's also budget friendly. Sway bars have a big impact on the handling of the S550 or any Mustang, and so they tend to be one of the most cost-effective handling upgrades. They provide a lot of benefits such as less body roll for better all-around handling, which is great news for the S550 chassis, and they aren't as expensive as other suspension mods. The way sway bars work isn't complicated. During normal driving and cornering, the suspension is going to compress and decompress. A sway bar counteracts this compression and decompression. The weight transfer during cornering creates a twisting force on the sway bar, so the sway bar creates a lifting force on the outside control arm in order to create a flatter handling experience. By flatter handling experience, I mean things like correcting understeer and oversteer. And I personally noticed a lot of oversteer on the S550 chassis with the stock components. There are a few things that affect how much of an impact a sway bar has. The thickness of the bar and its composition are going to play a big role, and these bars from ST Suspension are solid steel and they're cold form steel. This means that they're going to be very strong and have a higher level of yield strength, but the flip side of that is that they are going to be heavy, or at least heavy compared to a tubular bar. If you don't want the weight, there are other kits that you guys can check out. But if you aren't trying to cut weight, solid bars like these are very strong, like I mentioned earlier. And both of these bars are both upgrades over the factory bars. They're also powder coated black, so they're going to have corrosion resistance as well. Another factor that's going to affect how well a sway bar works is the geometry of the bar. So a sway bar has bends in different angles, but the key is going to be the length of the lever arm, which is right here. Now both of these bars are three-way adjustable. You can see that you have 3 options here for your install, and having these bars be adjustable means that you have a longer lever arm. The shorter the lever arm is, the greater torque and the more force that the bar will have. This is what you're going to be adjusting when you're moving around between these holes on an install. It's the amount of force and torque that's going to be applied to that outside control arm in order to decompress the outside suspension. Now, having these bars be 3-way adjustable means that you're really going to be able to set your car up for track use or high performance or even street use. These bars are going to be multifunctional for you. So bushings are also going to have an effect on the sway bar. These bars come with polyurethane bushings, which is going to be a good option for a street car. Poly bushings are more rigid than the factory softer rubber bushings, but they aren't too rigid to stop all movement. The more rigid the bushings are, the more rigid the bars will be because they'll not be allowed to move as much. Now these bushings are also easy to maintain, which means that you can keep greasing them over time, which will keep down on the noise level and keep the life of the bushings. The last thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to sway bar effectiveness is that suspension travel is going to affect the sway bar. When I say suspension travel, I'm mostly referring to spring rates. The sway bars and the springs are going to work very closely together, like all suspension parts do. So if or when you shop for springs, or if you already have them, just keep your sway bars in mind. The basic rule of thumb is that sway bar thickness should increase as static spring rates increase, and vice versa. When it comes to fitment, these sway bars are going to work on all 2015 and up Mustangs, including coupes and convertibles, the GT, the V6, and the EcoBoost model. As far as price, you're looking at spending between $400 and $500 for this kit, which is relatively close to the other options on the site, which include Ford Racing and BMR. The other options on the site do have different materials or different adjustability or different thicknesses, so just make sure that you're shopping in the range of materials, thickness, and adjustability that you need for your setup and how you want your car to perform. The install for these sway bars is not difficult at all, and you're looking at spending about 2 hours to get it done and a 1 out of 3 wrenches in the difficulty meter. Need a handful of different tools, but nothing crazy, and as usual, a lift would really help here, but the job can be done on jack stands if you don't have access to one. Your old sway bars are going to need to be removed, but this is just a few bolts. And I'd recommend greasing any new bushings well prior to the install, since waiting until after everything is installed will make that process much more difficult. I'd grease the bushings as much as possible, since poly bushings can be a little bit noisy after a short period of time. Getting the factory sway bars out is really only a few bolts. You might need to pop out your airbox to get to some of the bolts for the front sway bar, but the majority of the bolts can be removed from reaching down through the engine bay, except for the end link bolts, of course. Then you just have to maneuver the old bar out, which can get a little tricky, but it just takes some time. The rear bar is a little bit easier to get to. You can get to all the bolts from below the car. Just remove the end links and the bolts in the brackets that hold the bar to the subframe and sneak the bar out from below the car. The new bar is installed the same way that the old bars came out, so no surprises there. Then you just need to figure out your adjustment points and how you want the bars adjusted on install. Wrapping things up here, the ST Suspension Anti-Sway Bar Kit includes a front and rear 3-way adjustable bar that are solid in design and thicker in diameter than the factory bars for more rigidity. This kit's made to help with cornering and handling by keeping the suspension flat and even, and you can check it out more online right here at AmericanMuscle.com.